Welcome, everybody. John Arvosis here to talk about the latest from Ukraine. Well, maybe not from Ukraine, but on Ukraine. How's everybody? I am doing okay. My dog had me up all night last night. That was a joy. But took a nap, feeling a little better. She was sick again, but better now. But literally, it was like midnight, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 7 o'clock. And then finally 9 o'clock, of course, when I get up at 8, actually, then she was able to sleep. So she gets gastro issues. So of course it didn't, she ate dirt Thursday night, or Tuesday night. She just got into my plant, decided to eat dirt. And I was like, oh God, here we go. And what do you know? Wednesday morning, it was like, all freaking day. Oh my God. Anyway, yeah, had me nervous so didn't eat and drink for a day, but then anyway, I still had some of the miracle drug from the vet left over, the sucralfate, which I think is a miracle for this stuff. In any case, oh my God, yes. So I was a mess yesterday. So when I was doing the show last night, that's why I kept looking at her to see how she was doing, because she'd been like just throwing up all day. Anyway, enough. Exactly. Welcome to the Sasha News Network, where it's Sasha all the time. Anyway, so, there is no issue today with TikTok. Syndicate, we got to get rid of that little thing. I'm not logged into the other little server. Well, if Syndicate's here. Otherwise, there is no issue with TikTok today. TikTok is going fabulously. Thank God. Hey, everybody. So just do a little welcome, of course, as to where you're all from, as always. And I will start shortly. A lot of news again today, interestingly. Syndicate may or may not be with us today. He's had a little bit of a cold or something. So ignore the little message coming across saying that there's an issue with TikTok. Yesterday there was, today there is not. Ireland, Nebraska, Portugal, which I've not been to and have so been meaning to get to Portugal one of these days. Quebec, that I only passed through your airport, but will again. Radoslav, Bulgaria is going to be on my list. God, I've got all these places on my list. Illinois, I'm from, so sorry, you're not on my list. Although Southern Illinois, I wouldn't mind going to Springfield at some point. Anyway, guys, so I will start with my housekeeping, as I call it. So housekeeping issues. Saturday, we're going to have a special show Saturday night at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, U.S., 3 p.m. Pacific, God knows what, Europe. And with Shervin Malekzadeh, I'm not sure. It's Iranian, who's a Iranian American, I believe, professor at Colgate University. And he's going to be talking to us about the Iran crisis and all the protests going on, the historical roots of the protests in Iran, and, kind of where he sees it going. He's got concerns, we'll put it that way. I mean, obviously he's pro-protest, but he's got concerns about what's going to sort of happen to Iran. So that should be really fun and interesting. So that'll be Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, U.S. I will be also joining you guys tomorrow anyway, so that'll be a extra one that we'll do this week on Saturday. Our auction in our Discord, I've got a Discord. You folks remember Discord? Actually, I'll put my little list up here. Discord.aravosis.com is our Discord community. We do a couple auctions all the time. I think I try to keep 2 going at once. And half the proceeds from the auctions will go to our next Ukraine humanitarian fundraiser, and half will go to support my work, because I'm doing this full time, guys. So I really could use your help. But tomorrow we've got one that is ready tomorrow, that is expiring, so to speak, tomorrow. Quite hot bidding going for that. That is our Ukrainian beret badge. It goes on the berets of the sailors. And it's a original, real Ukrainian sailors beret badge. You see the trident in the middle and then the anchor, and it's got a little pin to hold it on. It's got 2 little holes in back. I do not know the metal. It could be brass. It's very heavy. I know some of these pins are brass. But anyway, that's been very popular. We've got a new auction. I will just show you that really quick, what the new auction is as well. Ukrainian shirt, men's medium, I would call it. It's a unisex, but I tried it on over my shirt. I'm a medium. It's a medium. Men's medium. Really nice shirt, actually, from a company in Odessa. Odessa, Ukraine, that Vlad sent over, and a Ukrainian military patch. You see it on the bottom. That's the patch. Those are the patches that they wear on their shoulders in the military. And both of those are up as well. It's this patch. Woo woo. Velcro on the back goes on the, like, oh, actually, it actually hangs on my shirt. There you go. Very fancy. Now you can say I wore it too. Any case, so that's what's up with that. Thank you to Marcy and Andrew, who are our newest VIP members on the Discord. The Discord is free, but I ask folks, if you can, to try to support me on the Discord. If you could become paying members, that would be great, because hopefully it would be nice if I could actually afford to keep doing this, because so far it ain't happening. But I still care about this, and the issue matters to me. And there you go. We can talk about more of that at the end, but let's, Joe, jump right into our topics. Ukraine topics. Boom. There we go. Okay, number of topics today. Actually, it got busy again. Putin is giving his big annexation speech tomorrow. The whoops, where is this here? I'm going to pull this up for you. Oblast held by Russia. So actually, I'll show you on here. So what I've circled in red are the 4 oblasts, 4 regions, 4 states that the Russians are holding on to, occupying in Ukraine. You can see on the very bottom, thank you for the gift there on TikTok. Oh, I was just going to say, I always forget to mention that. Gifts on TikTok are very welcome, but remember on TikTok that when I've got the cool stuff on the screen, like I do when I'm broadcasting now to you guys, the hats and the glasses do not work. Everything else works. So thank you for that. Keep them going. And on YouTube, obviously, keep going with the super chat questions. You can use those to submit questions to me, or regular questions. And on TikTok, use the Q&A in my profile to submit questions if you would. So anyway, back to the 4 provinces. So these are the 4 provinces: Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, and Luhansk, that the Ukrainians, thank you for the hamburger, that the Ukrainians are still fighting to get back. The Russians are occupying them. And these are the 4 that the Russians are going to be annexing, taking and making part of Russia. Putin is going to announce the annexation tomorrow. That is the current plan. He's going to announce it. Thank you for the flowers there. He's going to announce it 8 a.m. Eastern time, U.S. That would be 3 p.m. Moscow time. This is kind of a crazy thing he's doing here. It really doesn't make a lot of sense, because, I mean, okay, it makes sense in one hand. On one hand, it makes sense that Putin's annexing these regions of Ukraine, because he needs to show his people that all of this mayhem, all the death, all the fighting for the last several months has been worth it. And even the mobilization, right? The rollout of the mobilization in the last week, where Putin's trying to call up another 300,000 men, maybe even 1.2 million, we're hearing. He's got to show Russians that it's worth it. All the trouble of the last week has been worth it. And to do that, he wants to show that they're annexing these 4 regions of Ukraine and saying, look at the shiny new parts of Ukraine that I've stolen, and I'm making part of Magna Russia, right? Well, the problem is, what happens when it comes time to negotiate? First big problem, right? I mean, it's one thing for Putin to negotiate and give back parts of Ukraine that he's occupying. It's another thing for Putin to negotiate and give up parts of Russia. And legally, from a Russian perspective, those will be parts of Russia pretty soon. Putin will announce it tomorrow. And then there's a whole legalistic process of going through the parliament, going through some committee, going through some constitutional court, going back to parliament. Then Putin has to sign it into law. It's complicated, but it'll probably happen in a week, I would suspect, max. Once he does that, how does Putin give it back? Right? So that's the first problem. Second problem, it's one thing to lose parts of Donbass, parts of Donetsk, parts of Zaporizhia, Kherson, right? Like in the counteroffensive the Ukrainians had the last couple of weeks. It was highly embarrassing to Russia. The Russians were very upset they were losing this land to the Ukrainians, but they were losing Ukrainian land that they had occupied. That's not nearly as bad as, wow, over the last 2 weeks, we've lost a chunk of land that, or what was it, 1,000 square kilometers, whatever it was, of our own mother Russia that the Ukrainians took over. And again, from a Russian perspective, that's what Putin's going to have to explain, is when the Ukrainians keep doing better and better. So I'm not quite sure I even get, I guess I get, bottom line, I guess I do get why Putin's doing it, because he's desperate, right? He's desperate. Thank you for the origami there, right? mean, kind of makes sense. If he's looking to shake things up. One of the way he's shaking things up is by blowing up these oil rigs. We'll talk about, not the oil rigs, the natural gas pipelines. We'll talk about that again in a minute. And part of it is doing this. He's trying to have the massive mobilization, and he's trying to take these lands so he can show something. And he's probably thinking, I'll worry about how we settle this later. Right now, I've got to hold on to power and prove to people that we did something right. Right? That's my guess. Let me look here. I just want to see. I was intrigued when people sort of throw in questions or something. Glad you like the topic list there, Dubberg. Thank you for the flowers. Tarot Guy is saying, do you think the West could funnel money into partisan movements in these annexed regions? Maybe, yeah. Although they may not even need money. They may need weapons and things. Good way to potentially kick the Russians out of these areas without the use of the Ukrainian military. Clearly somebody is forming partisans. I mean, they're called partisans. It's funny. Partisan is the word we use for being partisan, right? Being Republican or Democrat or whatever. Partisans are freedom fighters, so to speak. They're citizens of occupied territories or occupied countries that are fighting back. And usually it's secretly fighting back. They're getting weapons and intelligence from, for example, Ukrainians in the occupied territories are getting intelligence from the Ukrainian intelligence ministry or whatever, defense intelligence. And they're even getting weapons. They're getting bomb making materials, all sorts of stuff, right? So they're already getting that because we know the Ukrainians have done a really good job of blowing up Russians and blowing up also their own collaborators, Ukrainians who are working for the occupation government. So that's been happening a lot. If this war becomes a long-term war, meaning a 10-year war like we had in Afghanistan, well, like the Russians had in Afghanistan, or 20, like what we had in Afghanistan and Iraq, the Americans, then you will absolutely see this turn into much more of a guerrilla war, and America and the West will be Wolverines. Exactly. America and the West will be financing it. Yes. And doing what we can to get the weapons to them and everything else. So eventually, if it has to be, Empty History is saying we won't have to necessarily fund partisans as the Ukrainian military is still active therein. If they withdraw, then probably yes. Well, the thing is, and again, it's happening now. I mean, the Ukrainians are doing a really good job of whether they're financing, whether they're providing weapons, but organizing partisan activity there now. So, I know somebody should annex Moscow from your lips to everybody's ears. All right, let me keep going. So the Ukrainians are saying today that they are actually worried about the Russians possibly using these tactical nukes, right? These theater nuclear weapons, the smaller nuclear weapons we've talked about, that the concern is that the Russians might use on the battlefield. I'm reading what the Ukrainians said today, but I think it's interesting because you've got to keep one thing in mind. The Ukrainians aren't just telling the truth. They're also telling the truth they want Russia to hear and they want the world to hear. So it's possible the Ukrainians are saying this because they really do think Russia's going to use nukes, or they're saying it because they want to reinforce to the West that, hey, there's a problem. I don't know. Just keep that in mind is all I'm saying, because I'm not 100% convinced the Ukrainians mean this, but maybe they do. Intelligence. Probability of Russia striking Ukraine with tactical nuclear weapons is very high, the Ukrainians say. They will likely target places along the front lines with lots of personnel and equipment, key command centers, and critical infrastructure, said Vadim Skibitsky, deputy head of Ukraine's military intelligence, told The Guardian. In order to stop them, we need not just more anti-aircraft systems, but anti-rocket systems. Now, that's a possibility right there. It's possible the Ukrainians are using the Russian nuclear threat to try to turn it around and say, okay, if you're going to threaten nukes, then West, you better take it seriously and give us more weapons. So it's possible. Polish foreign minister Zbigniew Rau was interviewed by, who was it? I think, actually was interviewed in the Polish press and was asked about the nuclear threat and how Poland and the West would respond. I'll just read you the translation of the article, two paragraphs. Our journalist asked Zbigniew Rau, who's the foreign minister, about NATO's likely response to a possible Russian nuclear attack in Ukraine. The head of Polish diplomacy assured that the world would resolutely, in agreement with the U.S., respond to such an attack. Here's what he said. In such a situation, the response of NATO countries would probably be as presented by the head of the National Security Council of the United States, Jake Sullivan. It would come down to a conventional response in Ukraine, meaning not a nuclear response, but using bombs and jets and all sorts of things that are not nuclear bombs, right? So other bombs, conventional bombs. Our journalist asked if this would mean the entry of NATO forces into Ukraine. He answers, was that what Jake Sullivan had in mind? It cannot be ruled out, but it must also be said that it would not be a necessary procedure because conventional weapons can be used, for example, by aviation or launching appropriate missiles, not necessarily from Ukrainian soil. So there you go. Doesn't really tell us much more, but well, actually, what I do think is good is that we are having more and more people make clear that there is going to be a military response, and it's going to be a military response likely on Russian troops if they do this. It's also, as an aside, I'm kind of fascinated that Google Translate can translate something this good. This was literally the translation. I didn't even have to massage it. And I'm kind of blown away that it can just take something in Polish and the English was that good. I mean, this is damn good English. They've gotten very good. CNN says that at least 200,000 Russian men have left the country now. That was around the same number as yesterday. I don't think they have new statistics, but it breaks down to 100,000 Russians have crossed into Kazakhstan in the last week to avoid the draft. 53 or mobilization. 53,000 have crossed the Georgian-Russian border. Nearly 66,000 Russian citizens have entered the European Union. Growth of 30% compared to the week before. And this data does not include data from Mongolia and Armenia. So it's clearly going to be more than, I should say, it is more than 200,000. If you look at these other countries, hell, this could be closer to 300,000 even if you look at the other countries. All the other countries were averaging about 50 to 100,000. So who knows? Sort of going on with the mobilization and all of that, Putin's approval ratings fell after mobilization began. I am always a little leery of what to do about polls in Russia, because how do you poll people who are, living under a dictatorship, especially now, right? I don't know. So having said that, the fact that any poll would go down in terms of Putin's approval is certainly interesting, since I can't even imagine that happening. So if it happens, that's interesting, because who's going to admit, yeah, I like the guy less than I did last week to a pollster, but they did. The share of those who approve of Russian dictator, I love this. You can always tell, like I said, whenever I get this stuff from the Kyiv Independent, because they throw in phrases like that. Russian dictator Vladimir Putin's. He is, but it always cracks me up. Russian dictator Vladimir Putin's performance dropped from 83% approval in August to 77% in September. Okay, could be within the margin of error, but it's something. According to a survey conducted by polling agency Levada, the percentage of Russians who believe their country is going in the right direction declined from 67 to 60%. That's significant. That's a little over 10%. Putin spoke out and said that he is demanding now today that, quote, the mistakes made during the recent mobilization be rectified, be fixed. Now, the interesting thing with this is that, first of all, a little bit of passive voice going on because, well, okay, here's the thing. And then Timothy, I'll try to get yours right after this. Putin is trying to claim, as they've been claiming on Russian news and Russian talk shows in the evening, their evening like primetime show they do, that the mistakes were made by local officials. Oh, Vladimir Putin wanted to follow the rules on who he was going to mobilize, who he was going to draft, but all those local officials just broke the rules, right? That's what he keeps claiming. The fact that Putin is even saying this, having to come out and say, oh, mistakes were made, we're sorry, is interesting, because it means they're worried. They're worried about the backlash. They're worried about all the men fleeing the country, because what they're trying to do too is they're trying to reassure men and say, well, if you're not in the specific category, former military was the main category. If you're not in that category, don't worry. And if you are a student, don't worry, we're not going to draft students. If you're elderly, we're not going to draft you. If you're infirm, we're not going to draft you. If you're a father of 4 kids, apparently that's the rule. If you've got 4 kids, I guess, you won't be drafted. But who's going to believe that? Well, let me get to this in a second, actually, next. It's not only who's going to believe that, but who's going to believe that that's where they're stopping? Who's going to believe that Russia next week or in a month, when things go even more, I was going to use I think it's a British expression that I always love. Mrs. Maisel uses it, tits up. I've never knew that expression until I watched that show. But I mean, until things just get more effed up, thank you, Nancy. Who's going to believe that they're not going to get you next week? Right? So listen to this, though. So Putin says there were a lot of questions from the population on this issue, and it was necessary to investigate every single case of wrongful mobilization and to return people to their places of origin in case of errors. How are they going to do? They've already mobilized apparently 100,000 men. A number of these men are already on the Ukrainian front. How are they going to get these guys back? Right? What are they going to do? They're going to say, well, what are they going to say? Send us an email? I mean, fill out a form? They've already been drafted. We know, for example, that a lot of these guys are basically getting either no training or one-day training, and then they're shipping them off to Ukraine. So these 100,000 guys, they could easily be in Ukraine already, these guys. How are you getting them back? I mean, literally, what's the process for coming back? Could you imagine? I mean, especially any military, really, to some degree, but can you imagine the Russian military, some new guy going, "Excuse me, officer, I'm one of those guys you took illegally. Putin just gave a speech that says I can go back immediately." Oh, he's going to probably shoot you, right? I mean, good luck with this. I mean, I'm glad in a way. Yeah, I've got Timothy. Thanks, Syndicate. I'll do Timothy's next. I'm glad in a way that things are going to be, because it's going to be so hard for Putin to fix this. The final, actually, let me read you this, 2 more little quick things to read you here. For example, this is what Putin said. Fathers of multiple children or people suffering from chronic diseases or those who are already beyond the age of the military were some examples of people who should have been drafted. If a mistake is made, then I repeat, it needs to be corrected. Return home those who were called up without a proper reason. Listen to this. So then Institute for the Study of War weighs in and says that yesterday, the military commissar of the Novosibirsk Oblast, so the Novosibirsk region in Russia, tells a Siberian news outlet yesterday that Russian officials will, quote, naturally mobilize men who are not reservists in order to meet military requirements, meaning, of course, we're going to bring in men who don't meet the requirements. If we've got to reach our quota, we got to reach our quota. Listen to this. He says that he will certainly start by mobilizing people with certain experience and within a certain age range, but that when that round of mobilization does not meet all of their requirements, meaning their quota, commissars will then mobilize men with no military experience or who would violate other restrictions on mobilization. Those restrictions include current students, parents of 4 or more young children, retirees, they're going to get 70-year-old men, and people with disabilities. I mean, but you've got to love this. Putin is saying today, oh, it was all a mistake. We don't know how it happened. We're sending everybody back. This guy yesterday is doing press interviews going, of course we're taking these guys. It wasn't a mistake. Again, good. I hope it is impossible for them to fix this. All right, sorry. I did know that Timothy had a question, but this was a long section on the mobilization, and there really wasn't a way to do a break. Timothy was asking, if the U.S. / NATO got involved with boots on the ground in Ukraine due to a nuclear strike, would that involve retaking all territory, including Crimea? Maybe. But here's what I think. It is going to, and this sounds crazy to say, but it's going to depend on how bad a nuclear strike, right? I mean, it sounds nuts, but it depends on just what the Russians do. believe it or not, there are small nukes and there's big small nukes, right? I was reading yesterday, like some of the smallest nukes literally could potentially take out a building and not have much radiation fallout from what I'd read, if that's true. If something like that happens, there's going to be worldwide outrage, but it might not mean a no-fly zone, right? It might mean that we take out the unit, or I don't know what we do, but we bomb wherever that bomb came from. I don't know. If they set off a bigger nuclear bomb, still tactical, but something bigger, what if they set off multiples? Because if I were, for example, if I were Russia and you're going to use them, I'm not sure I'd use one. I might use 10 or 20. I don't know. But I mean, like, if you're going to get in trouble for using one, you might as well use more than one, would be my logic if I were a bad guy, right? So how many does he use? How big are they? How many people does it kill, right? Does it kill a handful of troops? Does it kill 500 Ukrainians? I mean, right? It depends. But I really do think it's going to depend based on that, how much of a response there is from NATO. If it is something rather big that Putin does, I mean, not that nukes aren't big anyway, but you get what I'm saying. Rather big, the bombing, then you could see something where, Biden steps in and says, that's it, we're stepping in. Any part of Ukraine that is not occupied is going to be a no-fly zone, period. We're going in now. The Russians have 24 hours to withdraw all of their surface to air. Even better, what you would say is the Russians have 24 hours notice, or notice, well, no, maybe 12 hours. You said they got 12 hours, and they better tell all of their surface to air missile batteries, all of their their radar facilities to turn off. Because if we see any of them turn on, we are blowing them up effective immediately. And that's the first thing. And there will be no Russian jets taking off and flying within the Ukrainian airspace at all, or they will be blown up immediately. So I see that happening if Putin, but having said that, well, let me say this. The final point I was going to make with this is, I think potentially, because let's face it, Biden has already proven himself to be an incremental guy. I think from the beginning of the war, we saw how he's been kind of up in the ante in terms of better and better weapons and all of this. With the sanctions, he and the Europeans are both upping the same. But we keep asking ourselves, how are there even more sanctions? Like, haven't you done all the sanctions already? Right? So he likes this. I suspect with the nuclear thing, Biden would have the same. Not only would he have a different response based on how big of a nuclear attack it was by the Russians, but I think he wouldn't want to do everything at once. He would say, we want to make clear to Putin what a mistake it was and leave something else that we can do so that Putin doesn't say, well, screw it, right? If America's already entering the war fully, then I might as well use more nuclear weapons because they're already entering the war and they're already trying to take back everything, right? So it might even make sense for the U.S. to not do everything we can do because it tells the Russians, and if you do another nuke, it's going to be even worse. Having said that, I'll stop now. But having said that, a nuke is a nuke is a nuke to some degree too. And if we really want to teach people not to use nukes, then we just say, no, if you use one, it can be the size of a mouse. If you use one nuke, all bets are off. We're coming in and this war is over. I don't think, anyway, CK is saying there's no way US NATO could ignore use of any nuclear weapon. It sets a precedent. I agree. But I think our response is potentially going to depend on the size of the weapon used, how many of them are used. MT History Buff is saying the Western NATO rules of engagement have reportedly already been set for the scenario of a tactical nuke detonation. And that would be smart because they have to be set. We have to know now. Putin could do it at any moment. He's clearly, they've made the threat. So yes, they've got to know what it is. Justin, I doubt there would be a warning NATO and the U.S. isn't going to play. I doubt there would be a warning NATO and the U.S. isn't going to play. Justin, I'm not sure what you mean by that. I know that there is, I'm not sure what you mean by that. I mean, we've warned them privately. Now, we may not have told them exactly what we're going to do, but we have warned them privately. I also read yesterday that apparently, while a lot of our intelligence, our technical means, satellites, things like that, can tell when ICBMs are going to be launched, like intercontinental ballistic missiles, the really big scary things that we fire at each other in the world goes away, right? That they can tell, but being able to tell that they've put a nuclear weapon into an artillery shell or into a cruise missile or whatever versus a regular conventional bomb, we can't tell. So that kind of thing would be a surprise. Again, not sure what you mean by that. If you want to weigh in again, Justin, to say more, I'm happy to put it up. I think Putin's been goading the U.S. and NATO to get involved in the war, Jillian is saying. I think he's doing it too. I'm just not sure how smart it is. I think it's near-term thinking. A lot of people are saying Putin excels at just mucking things up, just throwing stuff against the wall and mucking things up. And to some degree, he's not doing well and he wants to create chaos. And one of the ways you do it is by using the nukes. And also maybe he does say, look, we're already losing this anyway. I'd rather lose to NATO than to Ukraine, because if I lose to Ukraine, I'm toast. I'm going to be always remembered as the Russian who couldn't even beat Ukraine. Whereas the Russian who couldn't beat NATO, that's not so bad. That's the big 800-pound guy rather than the little kid at the beach who beat you up from a Russian perspective. So, they will strike back immediately. Oh, the Russians, you mean? Oh, I'm sorry, NATO would. Well, both. I mean, we'd strike back immediately. It just depends what we would strike back with. All right. Carlos, thank you for that. Saw on SG1 today, the Russian liaison said they know that the submarines would get them. Oh, that's funny. Yeah, well, there you go. That's what I say. I've watched a lot of SG1. The use of quotas is an old Soviet policy system. Didn't work then, doesn't work. Right, the 5-year plan for mobilization. Putin could seek a limited NATO or U.S. intervention to use an excuse to claim failure. That's exactly what I was saying. Yeah. That he may want us to enter in some way because they're already doing it. I mean, look, the fact that, Kremlin TV started really big they've always said this, but about a week ago, they really started saying it, that, we're not fighting Ukraine, we're fighting NATO. It's a nice cop-out. I mean, it's an explanation for why they're doing so badly, especially like with this counteroffensive. It's not true, but it's a good explanation if you're trying to convince your people that it's less embarrassing. It lets the Russians save face too, right? I mean, the Russian people potentially save face. Although I'm still not sure. I mean, because I think like an American audience and going, well, it wasn't Mexico who beat us, it was the Russians, so that's okay. People here would be like, the freaking Russians beat us? Like, are you kidding me? Like, that would be embarrassing. I mean, again, different levels, I guess, but I still think it would be incredibly embarrassing. We're talking SG1, Stargate. That is what we're talking about. Yes. Syndicate. I had no idea. We'll have to talk. All right. Let me keep going, guys. I've got a little bit more news here. I know. Well, I don't mind. I like to have these kind of discussions, frankly. USA does not want war. It probably would potentially. Well, here's the thing, because somebody's saying it would help the recession. It may not. I mean, World War II obviously helped the global economies come out of the depression, but the lingering pain from the depression. But there is also a lot of economic problems clearly being caused by Ukraine already, and potential recession there, bringing the European economy down. If the European economy goes down because of the energy crisis, then that's going to bring down America and all the rest of us. So maybe. What else we got? Oh, okay. I had some updates on the military front as well. So one of the, I mentioned this to you guys before. Things have been going more slowly in the war. The Ukrainians had like their big push, right? And now they've been advancing much more slowly. Good news, and let me pull up a map here. So this again are the four Ukrainian provinces that Russia is going to annex. And interestingly, note the little red X I made up there. Looks like it's in the top of Donetsk province or Donetsk state. And the little red X is for the town of Lyman, Lyman. And it is a strategic town that is the site of a major railway crossing. So it's an important place for the Russians to use for supplying their troops in the rest of, well, really Luhansk to the east and also Donetsk going south. Okay. Well, what's happening is the Ukrainians have surrounded the Russian troops on three sides of that town, to the point where CNN quoted one pro-Russian official today describing the situation in Liman as difficult. So they're admitting they're in trouble. CNN said just that they're surrounded on three sides. Russian forces are reportedly committing newly mobilized Western Military District men to. I'm sorry, that was the first thing. This is the second note. So the Liman story is very interesting. But what's interesting is too, you'd have to look. There's Sloviansk. I don't think I've got it on the previous maps. Let me see here. Yeah, it's hard to see on the map here, but basically the Ukrainians haven't moved that much from where they were. So they had the big push across the blue, but where Liman it's not that far away from Izium, or sort of southeast of Kupiansk and all the rest. So it's not that far away from where the Ukrainians have already been. So it's moving more slowly, but big deal. And embarrassing as hell for the Russians, and strategically very important as well for the Ukrainians. Hang on, let me get that map off the screen. The Nord Stream pipeline, NATO is calling it a deliberate act of sabotage. As you know, these are the two pipelines, but they're comprised of four individual pipelines. So Nord Stream 1 has two pipelines, Nord Stream 2 has two pipelines, coming from Russia. Actually, I saw a map today kind of showing exactly, coming basically out of St. Petersburg, Russia-ish, through the sea there, right south of Finland, and then you just go down under the sea between Sweden and the Baltic states, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, and then and over to Germany. So it goes right like that. Somebody bombed, it looks like, 4 different times the pipelines and have put them out of commission. They weren't being used, as we already know. Nord Stream 2 was not yet certified by the Germans because Biden had gotten Chancellor Scholz to agree at the beginning of the war to not open the second pipeline. And the first pipeline, the Russians had shut down trying to punish Germany. In any case, there's not much update on that. That's what there is on that. CNN said the Italian embassy in Moscow has advised Italian nationals to consider leaving Russia in a statement today. I just find it interesting because the U.S. put out that statement yesterday, and the U.S. statement was itself a little odd. It talked about dual nationals and why they should leave because the Russians might draft you, and that makes sense. But it didn't kind of explain why the rest should leave, but it told everybody to leave, and now the Italians are doing the same thing. I'm wondering if it's this nuclear thing, because also here's the other thing. If the nuclear thing happens and we've got to respond in a way where we've got to bomb Russian troops, we're at war. The Russians may or may not say it, but if we've got to bomb Russian troops in Ukraine, that's an act of war. We're at war with Russia. And if we're at war with Russia, we don't want a lot of American citizens sitting in Russia because they could all be immediately taken hostage. So maybe that's what's going on. And the same thing with the Italians, because they're Western Europe, or they're Europe, I should say. So I just find it weird. Finally, the last little story to throw in real quick. Finland announced on Thursday that it would bar Russians from entering as tourists, closing off the last land route into the European Union for people fleeing the mobilization. The policy takes effect at midnight on Friday, so midnight tomorrow night. The decision leaves open some avenues for Russian nationals to enter Finland, including for work, studies, work, studies, and what an official described as humanitarian reasons. Last week, 2/3, this was interesting statistics, 2/3 of the 66,000 Russians entering the European Union via land borders came through Finland. Now, big part of the reason for that is they can't really come through because everybody else shut them off. The Poles shut it down, and thank you, Jingle. The Poles shut it down, and the Poles shut it down, and the Baltic countries as well shut down the tourist trade as well. All right, guys. Woo! That was a lot of news today. Well, actually, that wasn't that much. There was a lot of news, but we're going to still do Q&A now. There was a lot of news, but actually we had we had a lot of discussion, which I actually like when you guys sort of throw in questions and comments and things, because it's just, I enjoy the back and forth, and a lot of you know what you're talking about. So let's jump right in, guys. Throw the questions at me. TikTokers, I'm going to start with you guys. I will go to my TikTok app. Remember, go to my profile, hit the Q&A button, and that is the best way to submit a question. What do you think they should do about the collaborators? Woo! There's a question. What that person is asking is, what should Ukraine do about its own citizens that have betrayed their country and basically thrown their lot in with the Russians, who are taking jobs working for the Russian occupation, things like that. What the Ukrainians are doing at this point is send them to Russia. Actually, sending them to Russia is too nice, though, actually, because a lot of them would probably be like, good. I mean, they're working for Russia because they're happy to let Russia in. They'd probably be happy to go to Russia. I think that what they are doing is probably the best thing at this point. The Ukrainians are trying them and throwing the butts in jail for 10 to 15 years. I saw somebody in the last couple of weeks that I think already got a 10 to 15 year jail term for working for the Russians. That may be the best thing to do, because I wouldn't let them go to Russia. Whether they can execute them, I don't even know I don't remember. We looked into this once, whether that was even allowed in Ukraine. I don't even remember. But there you go. There's been, Grodon is saying there's been a lot of talk about Belarus, that they might join the war. What do you know? Belarus, to show people on my handy dandy Ukraine map, if you look carefully, you will see, hang on, hide the question. You will see Belarus. It may not be actually listed by name, but if you look straight up in the middle of the map, you'll see that river bisecting the country. You'll see Kyiv, the capital, right? The capital of Kyiv. And if you go straight up the river there from Kyiv, you cross a border. The country you're crossing into is Belarus. Russia is the country to the right above Ukraine, and it's also to the right of Ukraine as well. Belarus is the country up and to the left. And then when you go straight to the left, that's Poland, okay? So you can see where Belarus is. It's right on the border there with Ukraine. I mean, it borders Ukraine. It's not that far away from Kyiv. I forget if it's 75 miles, 100 kilometers, something like that. Sasha, I can't give you attention right now. My dog is sitting in my room, and she gave the little noise she does when she wants attention. But you can see where Belarus is. So it's strategically very important in terms of where it's located. And the Russians have used it to launch the earlier attack on Ukraine. The Russians came through, they crossed over through Belarus and then down into Ukraine. They've also been using it as a staging ground for fighter or jet airplane attacks and things like that on Ukraine. The Russians are moving like 22,000 men, I read today, from the new mobilization into Belarus, but they're pretty much just replacing the Russian troops who are already there. And it's a lot of supply troops and whatever. They're replacing the other ones because the other ones have been there for so long they're exhausted, 7 months, whatever it is. So I don't think that's a big deal. There has been some talk about whether Belarus is mobilizing troops as well to go into Ukraine. I mean, so far they've denied that. And at least from what people who know Belarus better than I, the Belarusian people are not too thrilled about going to war in Ukraine. And even though Belarus is a dictatorship, a brutal dictatorship, Lukashenko's the dictator, it's still not really clear he can get away with this. So it seems like he's been trying to do everything he can to not go to war in Ukraine, but still help the Russians as much as he can. So I don't see it. I just don't see it. At least not at this point. He doesn't really get any benefit out of it, really. Let me look here. Do you believe that NATO would go full out war? Yes, but it depends under what circumstance, right? This is where I was saying, I think the tactical nukes that Putin might use, were he to use them, she's just, see, you can't hear it. She's just, I have wooden floors, so she's just like circling around me, and you can hear her little chain going and the little, my dog cracks me up. I think what you would have is you'd have a preliminary step by NATO, right? So he uses a tactical nuclear weapon, a small nuclear weapon. You'd have a sort of a massive response from NATO, or a big response. But as I said, I think it's going to be a partial response, because I still think Biden is going to say, okay, that was our first response. And if you do it again, it's going to be even bigger next time. But he has to make it big enough that any other country watching who's got nukes or wants nukes says, holy cow, that was so horrible what NATO just did to Russia militarily. I don't want them doing that to me if I use tactical nukes. So kind of in a weird back and forth on that. Thank you, Marion, for that. But in terms of us getting into an all-out war with Russia, it's going to, and I don't, Justin, I don't know if this is what you were getting at maybe, but it's going to be, Russia does something, Russia uses a tactical nuke or something, maybe a couple. We respond militarily. We blow up their fleet in Sevastopol. The Russians, I don't know, nuke an American aircraft carrier, right? So all of a sudden then we blow up a Russian aircraft carrier, and all of a sudden you get this tit for tat that now is a war is growing, right? That could turn into an all-out war. It could. But it's not really clear what choice we have, because we can't allow them to use nukes and get away with it and set it just sets a horrible precedent for the world. Marianne, sweet of you. Mario is saying, I have a feeling Lukashenko would be, oops, went flying by, would be quicker and easier overthrown than Putin. Sending his own people to war could initiate this. Putin apparently had to come in and save his butt a couple of years ago. So, and Lukashenko is when the people rose up. So potentially, yeah. Let me just see here. Do you believe that shutting out fleeing Russians plays into the narrative that Putin is saying that the West wants to destroy ethnic Russians? I mean, yes and no, because they're fleeing him. So, what's he going to tell them? Oh, look how bad NATO is. They won't even protect you against me. You know what I mean? There's a little bit of a okay, yeah, NATO kind of sucks, but I'm running away from you because you suck even more. So, I don't know. I'm not terribly sympathetic to the Russians fleeing. I would probably leave it to better scholars than I to try to figure out whether does it play more to our advantage. And also, I would say our advantage, meaning in terms of the impact on the Russian population at large, if we let them flee. Honestly, I'm not sure you want all the people who hate the war to leave. I want people who hate the war to stay in Russia. I want them to hate it at home. I want them to get drafted. The people who do not want to be there, who hate this war and don't want to fight and don't want to kill, I want them in the Russian military, right? They're going to have the worst morale of anybody, and they're going to fight the worst of anybody. Now who is that? I'm seeing, was it Knez? Vysokich Juma. I'm reading your name. I wish my country finally. Oh, now which country is that though? Are you in Belarus or are you from Belarus? Which country is that? I'm just curious. Knez. I don't know. Where are you from? Let us know. Putin's choice. All right. Let me look at another question on TikTok. Remember, TikTokers, you can go to the Q&A in my profile. Okay, a lot of you are. This is great. If Russia uses nukes, what stops the U.S.? What's to stop the U.S. have taken out the Kremlin and other command and control? Wait, if Russia uses nukes, what's to stop the U.S. have taken out the Kremlin and other command and control? I guess I'm kind of get where you're getting with this. I guess what you're saying is what's to stop the U.S. from just going for broke? A cult from TikTok. Oh, okay. Hello. But where are you? I don't remember where are you from? Just curious. You said my country. I wasn't sure which country you mean that you wish would sanction Russia. I'm just not remembering. So yeah, I mean, if Russia uses nukes, what's to stop the U.S.? I mean, the thing is, first of all, what nukes is Russia using, right? We're not thinking Russia is using ICBMs, the big honking nuclear missiles that are really, end of the world stuff. We're thinking they're using these strategic nuclear weapons, which means we don't want all-out war with Russia if we can help it. We certainly don't want all-out nuclear war. I mean, we take out Russian command and control. We attack the Kremlin. That's going for broke stuff. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that could lead to nuclear war, launching missiles back and forth. So that is what I think would stop us, because it's like them attacking Washington. They attack Washington and it's war. I mean, it's big time war. And neither side wants that, I've not seen anything about new protests, Tired Guy. That's a good question. I've seen nothing about new protests in Russia, even the stuff in Dagestan that was getting a lot of attention. But not seeing anything now. But again, they're protesting with their feet. Clearly, the men are trying to get the hell out of there. Interesting. Oh, Empty History saying Russia still likely has its dead hand systems in place, so no major launch and command installations would be targeted. Dead hand system meaning, if it's the end of the world and all of the Russian leadership gets blown up and the Russian military gets blown up, there's an automated system that would then just launch everything at the United States, more or less, if I may speak for you, Empty History. And we would still worry about that being there. So we would be careful about what we blew up in terms of the Russian. When we say command and control, we mean the Russian leadership. Really, the military leadership, how they control their troops, everything, like taking out the Kremlin, taking out the Pentagon, taking out the White House. That would be, in essence, what you'd mean by taking out the command and control in a big way. One second here. Is there any way now Putin can be overturned? You mean overthrown, I guess you probably mean. He seems to be losing support from his own citizens. Yeah. I mean, the risk with it, of course, always is that we can't overthrow him, because if we try to overthrow Putin, that would be a war. That would be an act of war. And it's one of those, I always tell people, it's the comment, if you're going to shoot the king, you better kill him. Or in Alaska, they say, if you're going to shoot a bear, you better kill it, because then the bear is going to kill you if you don't kill it. And if you're going to try to overthrow a leader of another country, boy, you better be successful is the first issue. Second of all, you better know what's coming next. Like, what's going to happen next if you overthrow that leader? Are the military leaders going to launch all-out war against you? And in a place like Russia, they've got nukes. Is the military leadership going to join you? Are you going to win? If you don't win, we don't need Putin sitting there going, America just tried to overthrow me. Screw it. We're at war. He could, I don't know. So the thing is, JJ, I'm not sure what the Ukrainians, JJ saying, is the new Ukrainian intelligence on nukes legit or still unlikely? I don't know whether Ukraine is citing new intelligence. It could be their intelligence assessment, which is different from my view from saying Ukrainian intelligence. I think of Ukrainian intelligence as being they've intercepted a communication of the Russians talking about using nukes or whatever, right? I think the Ukrainians legitimately are concerned that Putin, let me put it this way. Would Putin use nukes? Sure. Right? It's not like it's beneath Putin or too immoral for Putin to use nukes. And the Ukrainians know it better than the rest of us, right? So I think the Ukrainians are saying, oh, this guy, he's committing genocide. Of course, he'd use nukes if he knew if he thought it would benefit him and he thought he could get away with it. I wonder, though, whether they're not playing it up a little bit to try to get more weapons from us, to say, okay, look, America, you're still holding off on some of those weapons. If you're really worried about this guy having nuclear war, then let us finish the job now. Because the longer this goes out, the more desperate he's going to get. And the more desperate he's going to get to try to change what's going on. So, oh, the after show. Look at you, Syndicate, putting up an after show thing. Good for you. I didn't see that. Syndicate just put up a little thing for you TikTokers. Oh, thank you on TikTok. That's one of my faves, if not my fave of late. this little seashore. As TikTok was saying, we do an after show, which I guess I've just been hauled into doing one tonight by Syndicate. We do an after show on the Discord where I come and just hang out, and we all kind of hang out and talk. So feel free to join us. Discord.aravosis.com. Let me look here. Another TikTok question. I mean, if NATO enters the war, do you think we could get to a point where the large ICBM nukes are used? I mean, could, sure, will, doubtful, because in the end, I'm sorry, my allergies are kicking in. In the end, if we start lobbing ICBMs at each other, it's over. We all die. And we know it, and even the Russians know it. As much as they love their bravado, the Russians know it too. So it's not in anybody's interest to start lobbing ICBMs. That's what I think is so weird about the theater, the tactical nuclear weapons, the little nuclear weapons that Russia could use. Thank you again for the C on TikTok. That's what's so dangerous about those, because they don't mean nuclear war necessarily, right? Whereas a big ICBM does, or even a big ICBM taking out Kyiv, the capital. I mean, no one's even talking about that. I mean, Putin does that. And I guarantee you, first of all, that Biden has a contingency in NATO. That is one of the contingencies they've got. What if Russia uses not just a theater nuclear weapon, but a strategic ICBM, right? Intercontinental ballistic, but one of the big boys that literally takes out the entire town of Kyiv, the Ukrainian capital. Then what do we do? Then we enter the war, and it's potentially World War III at that point, potentially. That's when I think we enter, and we've got all sorts of scenarios already in play where we enter and we go, this war is over. Now, the problem is you don't want the war to be over and have Russia be able to hold on to the territory it's holding on to. But I think at the very least, we would enter and go, that's it. No fly zone and everything else. It's over, But it's an interesting question, because economically, we've done what we can do to some degree. We'd have to respond militarily, and that's the danger of going to war. All right, getting to the end here. Why is the West holding off with weapons, or are they not revealing what's going on? Well, I mean, obviously, if they're not revealing what's going on, we don't know, right? Look, we've known from the beginning, Biden is hearing from somebody. I was told by some reporters that it's General Milley, who's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who's convincing him that, oh boy, we got to be careful with Putin. Anything can happen. We don't want to make him too angry. And Biden bought into it. And that's why we're not giving the Ukrainians, for example, we're not giving them the tanks that they need, that they could have. We certainly remember those fighter jets, forget it, that they were going to get at the beginning. And then, Poland was going to do it. And then the U.S. kind of freaked out. Why they're not getting the long range missiles, that would be incredibly helpful. I've had some people telling me, well, the Ukrainians can only use so many of the HIMARS, which is true, I'm sure. And there's only so much ammunition to give them, which is true. But we've given them the short range ammunition that goes 40 to 50 miles, 40 to 60 miles, say, distance, 75, 80 kilometers. And we haven't given them the long range ones that use, it's the same gun, the same HIMARS can fire a rocket that goes 200 miles or 300 kilometers. But we're giving them the ones that only go 40 to 60 miles. That's shitty. And we're claiming, because who knows, those crazy Ukrainians might use it to attack Russian land. Well, the crazy Ukrainians could do it now, and they're not doing it. So that's crazy. I mean, that's BS. But our other reason, and this is the real reason, is we're afraid Putin's going to get mad. Again, I'm more hawkish on stuff like this. It's risky, but I've got much more of a, whatever. I hate to compare myself to certain former presidents and certain prime ministers, but I am much more in your face. And you go, no, the next time we hear about a crime against humanity or a war crime, we're giving them long range rockets. And the next time after that we hear about you doing something, Vlad, we're giving them tanks. And the next time after that, we're giving them fighter jets. Keep it up. But every time, like the annexation, you say you annex those territories. Thank you for the stuff on TikTok there. You annex those territories, and they're getting their tanks. But that's what you've got to do. We're literally talking about more sanctions. Give me a freaking break. More sanctions. More sanctions. You know what I mean? We should have told them, no, they get the long-range rockets. And they're going to get a first batch of 50. And if you do the next thing on the list, we're going to send them 100 more of the long-range rockets and maybe some tanks. But you just make it. Anyway, that's what I would do. That's what I would do. All right, 7:01 p.m., guys. All right. Thank you for joining us as always. Oh, that's kind of cool. That was, sorry, TikTok, something a new kind of good night thing popped up on TikTok I hadn't seen before. Yes, I will do a recap. Yes. Thank you, Von Sparkle Bum. I had forgotten about that. I do always forget to do the recap. Well, because we get into such a discussion on stuff, which I enjoy, but then I forget to do the recaps. All right. Oh, thank you for the burgers too. Alrighty, let me dive right in and summarize the news, and then we'll go over to the Discord. Putin's giving his, at least the current plan is for Putin to give his annexation speech tomorrow, talking about annexing, where he's announcing that he's going to be stealing the Ukrainian territories where they've held the elections over the last week. Thank you for that too on TikTok. The little solar system, the planets flying by there. Putin, if he's still holding this, it's going to be at 8 a.m. Eastern time, U.S. So right when we wake up here in the States, 3 p.m. Moscow time. So keep an eye on that. The Ukrainians are saying publicly that they think Russia will use nukes, that the probability is very high. Polish foreign minister says that there will be a strong conventional military attack, not a nuclear, but a military attack in response to the Russians using these tactical nuclear weapons. And it could be troops on the ground, but it could be firing cruise missiles and things from planes and things like that don't necessarily require us to put troops on the ground. CNN is saying that at least 200,000 Russian men have now fled Russia to the neighboring states. And I had mentioned that this does not include Mongolia and Armenia. We don't have data for that. So the number could be as high as 250, 300,000 even. Polls are showing that Putin's approval rating has gone down since the mobilization began, and the number of Russians saying their country is going in the right direction has declined from 67% to 60%. Putin is now demanding, like it's not his fault, that the mistakes made during the mobilization be rectified. And he's saying, which gave me a chuckle, that every single man who was mistakenly called up needs to be sent home right now. And as I was saying, how is that going to happen exactly, right? Some Russian's going to go, excuse me, Mr. Field Commander, Vladimir said I can go home. That'll be the day. Good night, Greg and Rob. The Russians appear surrounded in the strategic town of Liman in eastern Ukraine, in the north part of the Donetsk Oblast. Thank you for the love heart there on TikTok. And the Russians, it's a strategic town, very important, and the Russians surround them on three sides, which is huge. Thank you for the ocean on TikTok. The NATO is calling the Nord Stream pipeline leaks deliberate acts of sabotage. It appears there is now a fourth leak discovered. The Italian embassy in Moscow has advised Italians to leave, which is interesting, coming on the heels of the U.S. advising Americans to get out. I don't know if I mentioned this. There were more landmine explosions near the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant, and Finland announced today that it would bar Russians from entering as tourists. And thank you for the heart on TikTok. All right, guys. Woo-woo! All right, let's go head on over to Discord. Thank you guys for helping. I appreciate if you can, any way you can help me out, because as I said, trying to do this for a living, and I can only do it with your guys' support. So thank you. And reminder, on Saturday, actually tomorrow, we'll have another live at 6 p.m. Eastern. Same thing. We'll talk about Ukraine, unless something huge happens in the news, but we'll do Ukraine. And then Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern, I will be having a special show. It is already set up on TikTok, and it is already set up on YouTube and Facebook. You can find them there listed for Saturday at 6 p.m. Same time as we did today, Saturday, 6 p.m. Eastern time, U.S. And I will be interviewing a Colgate professor who is an expert on Iran about the protests there, telling us what is happening, what does it mean, could times be different now in Iran? Could it finally be time that the Iranian government's going to get overthrown? Who knows? But he's going to be talking to us about that. That will be a really he's really good too. I mean, he's a smart guy, but I've seen him on TV and stuff. He's a really interesting. He's a university professor, so it's going to be fun. GMT or UTC, don't you dare. 6 p.m. New York City time. You figure it out. That's the way I do it. All right, guys, join me. I'll go over to the Discord. We'll hang out for a little bit. That's discord.aravosis.com. Join us over there, guys. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you for the last little flower on TikTok. Otherwise, we'll see you guys tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern, right? All right. All right. Thanks, guys. I'm signing off. As always, we'll do our 8-minute count for the TikTokers to catch up. Beep, 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 beep. I can watch it on the other screen. There we go. Okay, they caught up. All right, bye, guys.